Okay, so our next slide, we're going to talk about the regional area of the Far West. The conservative West developed through large investment in industry, yet where inhabitants continue to resent the Eastern interest that initially controlled that investment. The Far West spans several states, including Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, Nebraska, Kansas, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, North and South Dakota, Washington, Oregon, and California. So the first thing we're going to look at is from biography.com. It's entitled 10 Iconic Wild West Figures. These famous outlaws ruled the American frontier, by Udi Park. So in the 1860s and the 1890s, gave birth to the period known as the Wild West and laid a foundation for its ensuing mythology. It was an era of cowboys, Indians, pioneers, outlaws, gunslingers, brought together by the purpose of expansion, defense, greed, and reinvention. So we're going to explore some of these legendary outlaws from the Old West. And our first one is very well known, Billy the Kid. While not much is known of Billy the Kid's early years, he was born William Henry McCarthy Jr. in the slums of New York City and was orphaned at the age of 14. He eventually moved out west, where his days as a Wild West outlaw and gunfighter was ripe before him. On the lam from New Mexican authorities for stealing, Billy the Kid fled to Arizona, where he murdered a man during a fight. He returned to New Mexico and joined a group of cattle thieves and fought in the Lincoln County War. Although he boasted of having gunned down close to 24 men, he probably killed less than 10 before he was fatally shot at the age of 21 by Sheriff Pat Garrett. Next is Buffalo Bill. William F. Buffalo Bill Cody lived many lives before he became known to the world for his famous Wild West tour. Barely a teen, he took part in California's gold rush, and 2 years later became a Pony Express rider. He served as an Army scout in the Indian Wars, fought for the Union in the Civil War, and found a way of practicing his acting in between. By the time he launched his colorful cowboy-themed Wild West show in 1883, he was already a legend. Our next person is Davy Crockett. Easily identifiable by his coonskin cap. So that's a hat made out of an animal called a raccoon. Had a long black and brown and white tail. Very popular in the 50s. All the young boys had a coonskin cap. Davy Crockett was known for being a hunter, frontiersman, soldier, and politician. Is one of the most mythologized folk heroes and forefathers of the Wild West. Called King of the Wild Frontier, Davy Crockett got involved in Tennessee's local and state politics before representing it as a U.S. congressman in 1827 to 1833. After barely losing his election to serve out a fourth term, a disillusioned Crockett moved to Texas, which was under Mexico's jurisdiction at the time. In 1835, the following year, he fought for Texas independence and was killed in the Battle of the Alamo. Our next person, a woman frontiers lady called Calamity Jane. She was born Martha Jane Canary in Missouri. Calamity Jane grew up to be an adventurous frontiersman and performer. Famous for dressing and shooting like a man and drinking like one too. Jane moved to booming gold rush towns out west and became an expedition scout in South Dakota. She became famous for her wild antics and quickly learned that telling tall tales of her exploits, real and mostly imagined, could help her make money. Jane toured with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show and also appeared at the 1901 Pan American Exposition in upstate New York. Her rumored romantic relations with Wild Bill Hickok were probably started by her, but soon, even she tired of her fanciful stories and persona. Suffering from alcoholism, Jane died at age 51. Per her request, she was buried next to Hickok. So that leads us to Wild Bill Hickok. Like Calamity Jane, Wild Bill Hickok was known for telling outlandish tales about his adventures out west. He was a wagon master, Union spy, lawman, gunslinger, and gambler who became cemented as one of the most famous folk heroes of the era, thanks to his quick-draw duel with Davis Tutt in 1865. While playing a game of poker in Deadwood, Dakota territory, Hickok was shot in the back by Jack McCall. At the time of his death, he was purportedly holding 2 pairs of black aces and eights, now known as the dead man's hand in poker. Annie Oakley, called Miss Sure Shot, among many other names. Ohio native Annie Oakley lived an extraordinary life thanks to her champion shooting skills, which started in her teens. At 15, her talents came out in full view when she dared to compete with expert marksman Frank E. Butler, whom she narrowly beat in a shooting contest and eventually married. Later, she'd meet Buffalo Bill, become one of his star attractions in his Wild West show, where she had the opportunity to meet royalty, world leaders, and even befriend Chief Sitting Bull. Even up to her death, Oakley was setting records in shooting contests and preparing for a comeback. She died in 1926. Her husband of 5 decades was so devastated that he followed her to the grave just a few weeks later. Butch Cassidy. Robert Leroy Parker, better known as Butch Cassidy, closed out the last decade of the 1800s being a wanted man. With his accomplice, Harry Alonzo Lagoba, also known as Sundance Kid. The two robbed trains, banks, and led a posse of criminals called the Wild Bunch. Cassidy and the Wild Bunch wreaked havoc in places like Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico before fleeing the country to evade law enforcement. To make a clean escape, Cassidy and the Sundance Kid traveled from New York City to South America. In 1908, they got involved in a shootout with local authorities in the country of Bolivia, and it is believed that the two men lost their lives there. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is a famous Western movie, and we have a short clip of that. You can find that in the description box below or in the email I sent you. Okay, next is an outlaw named Jesse James. Like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, Jesse James was another celebrated bank and train robber who, along with his brother Frank, led the James Younger Gang. The James brothers fought for the Confederate Army during the Civil War and were accused of atrocious crimes against Union soldiers and abolitionists. Robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches throughout the Midwest, James gained celebrity status and notoriety, starting in 1866. After close to 2 decades on the run, James's life of crime came to an end when he was shot by new gang recruit Robert Ford, who was promised by authorities to be forgiven for his past crimes if he killed James. Next is Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp was a complicated frontiersman who lived many lives, both savory and unsavory. Not only was he a businessman, brothel bouncer, and gambler, but he had a few run-ins with the law before deciding to become the law. After moving from one boomtown to the next in search of easy money, he found himself in Dodge City, Kansas, as an assistant marshal, where he would spend his days maintaining the peace and doing his fair share of gambling. In 1879, he and several of his brothers moved to Tombstone, Arizona territory, hoping to get rich from the silver boom. While there, they found trouble waiting for them. A group of outlaws called the Cowboys. Soon the Earp brothers, along with friend Doc Holliday, would become legendary for their shootout with the Cowboys at the OK Corral in 1881. Doc Holliday. John Henry Doc Holliday was born and raised in Georgia before he became a professional gambler and gunslinger out west. He became a dentist who built his career in Atlanta, Georgia. Having caught tuberculosis from his ailing mother, Holliday decided to move to the Southwest in hopes that the drier climate would ease his symptoms. Like Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday was a drifter and risk-taker. Realizing playing poker was more lucrative than dentistry, he became a gambler and traveled westward. Texas, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. It was in Texas he met Wyatt Earp, and the two became lifelong friends. Holliday would eventually follow Earp to Tombstone, Arizona, and fight side by side with him at the OK Corral. At age 36, Doc Holliday succumbed to tuberculosis in California. Here's a short movie clip from the movie Tombstone with Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. Okay, something that has become part of popular American culture is cowboy clothing. And here's an article by Laurel E. Wilson. And she says, cowboys, vasqueros, gauchos, each of these words conjures a different image. Yet all these occupations originated in Salamanca and Old Castile region of the 12th century Spain, where cattle herders wore low-crowned hats, bolero jackets, sashes, tight-fitting trousers, and spurred boots. The cowboy hat is a hat with a high crown, wide brim, best known as the defining piece of attire for the North American cowboy. Today it is worn by many people and is particularly associated with ranch workers in the West and Southern United States, Western Canada, and Northern Mexico. With many country music performance and with participants in North American rodeo circuit, it is recognized around the world as part of Old West apparel. The cowboy hat was known today has many antecedents to its design, including Mexican hats such as the sombrero, with various designs of wide-brimmed hat worn by farmers and stockmen in eastern United States, as well as the designs used by the United States military cavalry. The concept of a broad-brimmed hat with a high crown worn by a rider on horseback can be seen as far back as the Mongolian horsemen of the 13th century. It is not clear when the cowboy hat received its name. However, European Americans in the western United States originally had no standard headwear. People moving west wore many styles of hats, including top hats, bowlers, remains of Civil War headgear, and sailor hats. Contrary to popular belief, it was the bowler, not the cowboy hat, that was the most popular in the American West. The cowboy hat was most likely adopted from Mexican vasqueros before the invention of the modern design. Blue jeans. Jeans are a type of pants or trouser typically made of denim or dungaree cloth. Often the term jeans refers to a particular style of trouser called blue jeans, which is invented by Jacob W. Davis in partnership with Levi Strauss & Company in 1871. Originally designed for gold miners, modern jeans were popularized as casual wear by Marlon Brando and James Dean in their 1950s films, particularly The Wild One and Rebel Without a Cause, leading to the fabric becoming a symbol of rebellion among teenagers, especially members of the greaser subculture. From the 1960s onward, jeans became common among various youth subcultures and subsequently young members of the general population. Today, they are one of the most popular types of specialty trousers in Western culture. Historic brands include Levi's, Lee, and Wrangler. The chuck wagon. A chuck wagon is a type of field kitchen covered wagon historically used for the storage and transportation of food and cooking equipment on the prairies of the United States and Canada. Such wagons formed part of a wagon train of settlers or fed traveling workers, such as cowboys or loggers. In modern times, chuck wagons featured a certain cooking competition and events. Chuck wagons are also used in a type of horse racing known as chuck wagon racing. Chuck wagon food typically included easy-to-prepare items like beans and salted meats, coffee, and sourdough biscuits. On cattle drives, it was common for the cookee who ran the wagon to be second in authority only to the trail boss. The cookee would often act as cook, barber, dentist, and banker. We've got a short little video clip about chuck wagons on the Chisholm Trail. Okay, so eventually the Wild West becomes a subject for movies. And the early movies were called spaghetti westerns. And they were called that for two reasons. One, most of the directors of the early westerns were Italian, and they were shot on location in Italy because it was cheaper than filming them in USA. Spaghetti westerns have left their mark on popular culture, strongly influencing numerous works produced outside of Italy. One actor whose career in film started with spaghetti westerns was Clint Eastwood. Here's a short clip from a movie filmed in Italy starring Clint Eastwood called A Few Dollars More. Another famous cowboy actor, his real name was Marion Robert Morrison, and known professionally as John Wayne, and nicknamed Duke, was an American actor and filmmaker who became a popular icon through his starring roles in Western films. His career spanned from the silent era of the 1920s through the golden age of Hollywood and eventually American New Wave, appearing in a total of 179 films and television productions. He was among the top box office draws for 3 decades and appeared with many important Hollywood stars of his era. He starred in 142 motion pictures altogether. According to one biographer, John Wayne personified for millions the nation's frontier heritage. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor of the United States. Here's a short clip from a movie, one of his more famous roles, called True Grit. So another cultural feature throughout the West is the rodeo. And it's a competitive equestrian sport that arose out of the working practices of cattle herding in Spain and Mexico, expanding throughout the Americas and to other nations. It was based on the skills required of the working cowboy and what today is the Western United States and Western Canada in northern Mexico. It's also in Brazil as well. Today, it is a sporting event that involves horses and other livestock designed to test the skill and speed of the cowboys and cowgirls. American rodeo, particularly popular today, within the Canadian provinces of Alberta and throughout western United States, is the official state sport of Wyoming, South Dakota, and Texas. The iconic silhouette image of a bucking horse and a rider is a federal and state registered trademark of the state of Wyoming. So here's a short video clip showing the rodeo and some of the contests that are part of it. Okay, so Western culture has also added a special kind of dancing that comes from the West. It's called line dancing. Country and Western dance, also called line dancing, encompasses many dance forms or styles, which are typically danced to country Western music, which are stylistically associated with American country and or Western traditions. Many of these dancers were tried and true dance steps that have been put aside for many years and became popular under the name country Western, cowboy, or country dancing. It's also known as kicker dancing in Texas. So here's a short video clip on cowboy dancing. It's called the line dance. There, for First Nations, the largest powwow gathering of First Nations dancing and music performances is called the Gathering of Nations. It's the largest in the United States and North America, and it's held every year on the fourth weekend in April in Expo, New Mexico, in Albuquerque. Over 565 tribes from around the United States and 220 tribes from Canada travel to Albuquerque to participate. There are 36 dance categories. Other competitions include Northern singers, Southern singers, women's backup singing, and competition for drum groups. A pageant for Miss Indian World is held each year. The winner is chosen based upon personality, knowledge of tribal traditions, and dancing ability. There is also the Indian Traders Market featuring artists, crafters, and traders selling Native American and indigenous arts and crafts. So here's a short video clip of that powwow. So finally we have music, Western music. Is a form of country music composed by and about the people who settled and worked throughout the Western United States and Western Canada. Western music celebrates the lifestyle of the cowboy on the open ranges, Rocky Mountains, and the prairies of Western North America. Directly related musically to Old English, Irish, Scottish, and folk ballads, also Mexican folk music of northern Mexico and southwestern United States influenced the development of this genre. So we have a couple of songs for you. Glenn Campbell, a famous country western singer, sings a song called WICHITA Lineman. So not all songs are about cowboys. A lineman is the person that fixes the wires of the telegraph or telephone or those high energy wires that string across the prairie. It's a simple tale of a lonely telephone repairman working in the vast open plains of the American Midwest, Wichita Lineman is one of the most perfectly realized pop songs of all time. So take a listen to Glenn Campbell, Wichita Lineman. Okay, so our next Western music song is sung by Paula Cole, and it's entitled "Where Have All the Cowboys Gone?" And it glamorizes cowboys. The strong, silent, rugged macho man in a Stetson hat has always been a powerful image. Women wanted to marry a John Wayne or a Gary Cooper, while men wanted to be John Wayne or Gary Cooper. Paula Cole is singing about the reality behind that image. The narrator of the song fell in love with a rugged, macho, rural male and married him, and only then learned that life with the real cowboy isn't so glamorous after all. Cowboys, ranchers, and farm workers in rural America don't make a lot of money. So she and her husband are barely scraping by financially. They had to sell their car, and he takes a job at a farm far away. So she's left to raise the children by herself, working her fingers to the bone, while her husband drinks away the little money he earns. She's left wondering, what happened to the man I idolized? I thought he was going to be the kind of romantic cowboy I saw in the movies. But there's nothing romantic or glamorous about this life at all. The video ends on a happier note. They resolve their issues and come together in the end. A quick note about Paula Cole. She was raised in Massachusetts and studied at Berklee College of Music in Boston. Okay, so we have a short video clip of Paula Cole's song, Where Have All the Cowboys Gone? So take a look at that. And our third song is a standard. It's been around for quite a while. Everybody knows it. It's entitled Rocky Mountain High, written and sung by John Denver. John Denver's more of a kind of a folk music singer. This takes on a Western theme. Rocky Mountain High is primarily inspired by John Denver's move to Aspen, Colorado. It took him about 3 years to write the song, and it's about his love of the state. The seventh stanza makes a reference to the destruction of the mountain's beauty by commercial tourism. The song was considered a major piece of 1970s pop culture and has become well associated with Colorado history. After years as an unofficial anthem for Colorado, in 2007, the Colorado General Assembly made Rocky Mountain High one of the 2 official state songs. Okay, so that basically wraps up our Far West introduction, and it's purely an introduction. There is so much there going on. It's a good area to think about for your research paper. So we have one small little discussion to wrap up our regional areas, and that's the American territories. America has several territories, both in the Caribbean and the Atlantic side, and in the Pacific side. The territories are American Samoa, Guam, and the Northern Mariana Islands. So this is a Polynesian culture. And in the Caribbean, our two main territories are Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we talked at length about Puerto Rican influence in our American Lit 4 class. And the U.S. Virgin Islands is really a small little island. It's kind of a tourist place now. Beautiful beaches. But in the Pacific, we haven't really talked about those islands per se. They are very closely related to the Polynesian culture of Hawaii. And we did talk about that at length as well. So recently in popular culture has shown tattoos. A tattoo is that ink drawing on the skin. And right now it's really popular with the rock singers and so forth, is the Polynesian style of tattooing. Usually around the arm, a band around the arm with Polynesian style and design. And to the Polynesian culture, those tattoos represent maybe your standing in the society or some positive cultural trait, bravery, warrior type of thing, that sort of stuff. So a little history behind tattoos. This guy, Captain Cook, explorer, he explores the Polynesian area, and he brings back the word tattoo to Europe. And with him, of course, he dies in Hawaii, but his shipmates return back to England, and they bring with them a Tahitian native named Maya, and he is covered with the Polynesian style tattoo. And tattoo, the word and the style, becomes famous in Europe. The Polynesian tattoos became popular with European sailors who would return home from their voyages with their bodies decorated with these tattoos. So that's one small aspect that our territories in the Pacific have added to American pop culture. So that's about it for today.